Hi, in this tutorial we're going to look at how to save data to an external text file on your web server using PHP. Now the example that we're going to build is a little bookmarks program that will allow you to add a bookmark and save that information to a text file and then view or retrieve the information from that text file. So for example, if I go to view bookmarks, I can see the bookmarks that I've already added. And then if I go to add bookmark, we'll add php.net in here and we'll put in the URL and add bookmark. Right? So we get a message, bookmark added. I go to view bookmarks and it retrieves my updated list. So we're going to look at the setup of this project and then how to save and retrieve this data from a text file. So I have a bundle of starter files that are posted in the description of this video that you can access that has all of the starter files for you as well as copies of what the finished code looks like. So I'm going to begin by going into the bookmarks.php file. And starting at the top here, some general introductory information. And there's a separate file that I have in there called clean.data.php. And if you open up that file, all right, this does some basic data cleanup, removing some slashes and some HTML tags and PHP tags that might have been entered into a string. So some very general basic data cleanup. There's also a footer.html file which just has the closing body and HTML tag. And then there is a header.html file that has our links at the top, right, to go to add a bookmark or view the bookmarks. And you can see that we're sending this information back to the same PHP file. So this will call our bookmarks.php file. And it's going to add choice equals add or choice equals view. And our PHP script is going to be set up to review or look for these. And depending on if we choose add, it's going to display the add form. And if it is view, then it's going to retrieve the data from the text files on the web server and display our form. So rather than writing this over and over again in our PHP script, it just created separate HTML files and then we can include them in our PHP script. So up here I'm going to put in an include statement to include my clean data PHP file. So now by doing that and having this up on my web server, anytime I want to run some data through here to be cleaned up, I can easily call that clean data function. Okay, next you can see in here we have an array set up for our errors. So if there are problems with any of the information being submitted in the form, we're going to put that into an errors array. And now we're going to start cleaning the data. So to do that, we're going to create a variable called choice, and we're going to get their choice from what was submitted. Now, where did we get choice from? If I go back to the header HTML file, right, it's going to send choice equals add or choice equals view. So when it gets to our PHP script, choice becomes our variable, and so we're going to grab that through a request and assign it to choice. And even though we are sending it in a link here, we're going to go through and clean it up anyway, just to make sure that some person hasn't tried to inject some other malicious types of things in here. So we do a basic cleanup of the data by removing any HTML and PHP tags that somebody might have added into the link. Okay, next we have an array to hold our value of choices. And again, this is another kind of security technique we're gonna tell it that these are the only things that we will accept: add bookmark or add or view. Now, add bookmark will come when we actually get to the form where they're filling out the bookmark and adding it. This add and this view are coming from the links in the header file. So we're only allowing add and view. And as I said, when we get to the form for adding the bookmark, we're only going to allow that to be one of our choices. Now, before I put that in here, I just want to go over really quickly the basic content that's already in your starter file. Right? We've got a validate function that is set up to check the description in the bookmark. We have global errors so that our errors will be available outside of this function. We're checking to see if the description is empty or the bookmark is empty. And if it is empty, then we add this message to the errors array. And if bookmark is empty, then we add this message to the errors array. Then we check to see if there are errors. Right? If it's greater than 0, then there are errors, and so we show them the form again, and we pass back in the description and bookmark and the error message. If there aren't any errors, right, it's not greater than 0, then we are okay to add the bookmark, so we're going to do the add bookmark function. So these are, the skeletons of these are already set up in here, so let's look at those. Right, the function to add a bookmark, we're including the header.html file. Right, so when we go into add, we pull up the web page again. Right, this is our header file that we want to have in there. So when we show the add bookmark function here, right, we grab the header and put it up here. And then for right now, we're just putting a message in here saying adding the bookmark so that we know that when we hit the submit button, it's getting into this function, maybe not doing anything yet, just this, and we'll build onto this part coming up. This is where we're going to actually store and take the data and put it into the text file. Now the add form function, add form is where we're actually displaying the HTML form. So this is creating this part of the HTML form, including our submit button down here. So this is displaying the add form. We're passing in the description and the bookmark and the errors so that if there are errors, it's going to be displayed back in here, and it's going to put the information back into the text fields along with an error message next to the form field with what the error message was. Right, and then we have the display form function where we need to include the header and the footer. So I'm just going to do really quickly the include header, and I'll just copy and paste this one to include the footer. And then the show bookmarks function that we have started here. When this function is called, again, it's going to show our header. We have some placeholder text right now to say, okay, we got to the function, we know it's here, but it's not actually doing what it's supposed to do yet. And this is where we're going to grab the content from the text file and then display it back on the page. Okay, so now that we have an overview of all of the functions that are built in there already, I'm going to come up to the main logic and I'm going to paste in a bunch of code and we'll review it. So our main logic, first of all, we start out is checking to see if the choices that were submitted are in our choice array. Again, just a basic security to check and make sure nobody's injecting any funny stuff and trying to hack into our form. So we're checking to see if in array choice, right, if what was submitted from our form after it's been cleaned up is in our choice array. So if it's one of these options. So if it's not one of these options, then it's going to kick them back out to the form. So hopefully somebody trying to hack in there will just keep getting sent back to the form because what they're putting in is not one of these options. And if it is in the array, if it is add bookmark, add, or view, then it's going to say you selected choice. So let me just show you really quickly. You selected add, right, or you selected view. I put that in there just so that we could see how the information was coming through into our function. If you don't want that in your final, then you could just comment that out. So now that we've gotten through the first level of security check, if choice is equal to add bookmark, then we're going to clean the information that's submitted from the add bookmark form. Right? Our add bookmark form looks like this. Right? So the user fills in a description and a URL. They click add bookmark. So this information is sent back to our form. Add bookmark is one of the valid choices. So it comes down here and it says, okay, if they're trying to add it, now we're going to clean that data again to make sure there's no funny stuff coming in. And once it's cleaned up, then we go through and send it to a validate function. Our validate function down here, again, is checking to make sure that description and bookmark is not empty. And then if it is, it sends it back to the form again. Then we have, if choice is equal to add, then we add form function, sending description and bookmark and errors to the add form function. If they choose view, then we're going to send them to the show bookmarks function. And if it's not one of those, then we display the form again. So the validate function is all set up and running here. So what we need to do is really work on the add bookmark, where it's going to save the data into a text file. And then once we have that part working, then we'll go down and look at the show bookmarks function, where we're going to retrieve the data from the text file and display it back on the screen. So in the add bookmark function here, I'm just going to comment out the adding bookmark print statement. And I'm going to paste in some text and then we will review it. So it's not too bad. You would think it would be a little longer and more complicated than this, but let me line these up. All right, so first of all, we create a file handle using file open or fopen. And we're going to tell it this is the file that we want to open, and we just named it bookmarks.txt. Now, if it doesn't exist on your server yet, it will be created, then you'll be able to save data into it, right? And then this flag is how do we want to add the data to it? We have different options. A is for append, which means we want to add data to the end of it. We don't want to overwrite what was already there. So we create a file handle that is pointing to this text file on the server and saying we're going to append or add the data to the end. This gets assigned to our variable called FP. So from now on, when we want to refer to this text file, we just use the file handle variable name FP. So this is going to open the text file for appending. And now we want to write our data to it, so we use the fwrite function. And so we're going to say fwrite to our file handle and the data that we want to write. So in here we're going to say variable description. The \T is a tab, and then we're going to tell it to put in our bookmark variable information, and then a new line character. So what will happen is the text file will write this information. We're going to separate the description from the bookmark with a tab, and then at the end put in a new line character. So that means each line in our text file will be one entry of a description and a bookmark. Let me pull up a copy of the text file that's on the web server so that you can see what that looks like. So here is my text file, and you can see that it has the description, and then there's a tab between that and each of the bookmarks, and then there's a new line, so each entry will be on a separate line. And that makes it easier when we retrieve this information from the text file to read in up to the tab, and then we'll take this value and assign it to a variable, and then we'll take this value after the tab and assign it to a variable. So that'll make it a little easier. Now when you save data to a text file like this, you shouldn't try to do any type of formatting, like adding any HTML or any tags or any kind of other formatting, because we can retrieve this back into your PHP file, and when we read it back in and display it, that's where you're going to do your formatting. So this is just, a text file. Text files can't store formatting information or data. So I'll leave that up here for a second so we can see that how this data and information translated into a bookmarks.txt file. So appending means that it's going to add in when you put in the next piece of data, it will add it to the end of this. And since this is fairly invisible, we put in a little message that says bookmark added so that we at least know it got to that point. And then we're finished with adding and working with the file handle, so we're going to close it. And so that's all you need in order to store the information to a text file. Now if you had more things, more variables, you can separate and have multiple things in here with tabs going across. Okay, so next we want to work with retrieving this information that's been stored in your text file. So we'll go down to the show bookmarks function, and again we're including the header so that when we go back to this form and we go to view bookmarks, right, we keep the same header HTML file in here with our navigation. So now we want to grab this information and display it on the page. So in a similar fashion, we want to open up a file handle for our bookmarks. And I'm going to copy and paste some code in. Again, we'll review it. Okay, let's see, this is kind of repeated back down in there, so let me get rid of that. So we open a file handle for a bookmarks.txt file, and just in case there is no bookmarks.txt file, if they're the first one and then nothing's been added and then they hit show bookmarks, we're just doing a little check to say if there is no file for some reason, we'll display a message. Otherwise, we print out a little statement here to format our output in a table. Then we create a variable called the data, and we're going to set that equal to the file bookmarks.txt. Right, so we open it, put it into the file handle, and then we're saying our bookmarks.txt file is going to be the data. Now to read in each line, right, we're going to take our text file here. We're going to read in one line at a time. So for each is good for looping through everything in a list until there isn't anything left. So it's going to loop through this is actually an array if you think of it in terms of that. This is an entry in the array, this is another in the array. So when we use a for each with an array, it's going to go through a line at a time, or each element in the array. This gets assigned to line. As long as there's still stuff in our file, it will keep going through a line at a time. So we don't have to know how many entries are in here. A for each loop is going to loop through until there isn't anything left in the data. So it's going to take one line at a time, and this is what it's going to do for each line, right? So what's inside our curly braces in our for each loop, it's going to do this for every single line in our text file. So it'll take the first line and it's going to trim any spaces at the end. Then we start to print our row, right? Each of these is going to be a row on our screen in our table. So we're going to do an opening TR tag. And now here's where some of the real nitty-gritty happens in here. So we pull this up. We have a list function, and basically it's going to take the item that's in the line, right? We have our line. We're going to split it on the tab, and it's going to take the first element and assign it to description, and it will take the second element after the tab and assign it to bookmark. So it's going to take this, split it up on the tab, and then assign these to these two different variables. Then we simply print them out inside TD tags. And in order to make our bookmark a hyperlink, you can see that we've added an href tag in here around our variable. And so that opens that up and displays it back out into a table. The one other thing that you have to make sure you do is that in the add bookmark function, right in here where we're calling the add bookmark function, we're passing in the description and the bookmark. So we have to make sure that we pass in description and bookmark here so that it gets this information and it knows what description and bookmark are in order to be able to add them to the text file. So I wanted to make sure that we didn't miss that one little detail, otherwise that part will not work. So that is a basic little program on how to save text or information to a text file and then how to retrieve it back and display it back out from the text file.